Good day, Dr. Randy. How are you doing today?
I am having a particularly sweet day, and I don't even know why. I just all of a sudden woke up and I looked outside, and the trees were just beautiful, and I wanted to hug every one of them and thank them for giving us oxygen. It was one of those kind of whimsical mornings, that
It's nice. It's
make
it's
me
nice.
so glad to be alive. You have those too, where you just wake
Yeah. Well, I in the morning I take the kids to school and but yeah, it's just like a beautiful day. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, just perfect.
yeah.
I think it's in a little chilly side, but that's all right.
Well, it's supposed to be, and then it'll get hot again and then cold and whatever. But you
Mm.
know, life can be very interesting, and I love those days when it is interesting. Just basically, just to be alive.
And I know our topic today is healing from emotional abuse. So,
It's a big topic, and we're going to try to encapsulate it in a little bit to just help people a little. But I have dealt with literally dozens and dozens and dozens of people in relationships where they are emotionally abused, or God forbid, where both are emotionally abusive, like Virginia Woolf. But usually it's the person that has the least amount of power, of course, in the relationship. And, the saddest thing about it is it's very, very difficult for friends and family and loved ones to get a person out of an emotionally abusive relationship. They seem trapped in it, like they can't disconnect from it. And so they keep denying the abuse and putting that person on a pedestal, and they won't look at it. So finally, they get to the point where they're either breaking, or the relationship ends, or whatever happens, or they die in the relationship in a martyred, abusive, horrendous ending. But they will eventually come to me. Usually they want to come to me to help them heal the abuse within the relationship. They don't want to leave it, but they want the tools to heal it and hold on to the relationship. Well, you can't take away power from anybody at any age, 2 years old and up. They won't give it up. So if a person who's been the abuser and has had all that power, most of them are not very interested in changing. And in order to heal the abuse within a relationship, you have to really have a willing partner who's going to say to you, yes, I am abusive. I was abused as a kid. There's only the abuser and the abusee, and I became the abuser and you became the abusee. And I want to change this as much as you do. So I want to go to therapy with you, and we're going to work on changing those patterns. Very, very rare. So I'm going to talk about how they ask me at the beginning of a relationship and the stages of how I can do it and still not give up what I want, which rarely, rarely works. And after they get out of a relationship, sometimes the abuse continues. Like if they have children, or they'll stalk them, or they'll do more stuff. And so it's not easy to get out, because sometimes people are afraid that if they give it up, they're going to be in a worse situation. Or children, or they'll have to give their kids up to that abuser half the time and not have the control to be able to be the buffer that keeps it from becoming intergenerational.
mhm.
So let me kind of try to take an enormous subject and sort of will it down to just 4 stages that we can kind of talk about a little bit,
Okay.
that are necessary for that abuse to happen. So what's important first is, what makes people endure it? What keeps them in a relationship where they're being put down and validated, mocked, humiliated constantly, told every day what's wrong with them or how they didn't measure up? What keeps people in a relationship like that? Because often these are wonderful people in the rest of the world, but in this relationship, they just allow this horrendous, disdainful behavior.
Mhm.
So sometimes well, not sometimes, often they saw it in childhood. One of their parents was the abuser, one was the abusee, or the parent abused them and the other person didn't step in to stop it. Maybe they would care for them afterwards, but they didn't get in there because they were just as afraid of the person as the child was. So big chunk of this comes from childhood experiences. That's what happens. Love and abuse go together. There's no way to separate that out. Children tend to, when their parents don't love them, blame themselves. If one parent dies, for instance, they'll think, if my other parent can be taken from me, but if I can find out what I did to make that parent die, then maybe I can change my behavior and the other parent won't die. So children will normally blame themselves, and they take that into a relationship. They're very quick to agree with the abuser that it must be their fault. That's another reason why they would stay. Often they suffer from all of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. They're hypervigilant, they're depressed but suppressed. They have fears all the time of something going wrong, or fears of abandonment, or fears of being a bad person. So you can actually see them exhibiting post-traumatic stress syndrome, symptoms, rather. Sometimes they can't imagine not living with that person. If that person is really charming, or maybe a narcissistic person, or knows how to kind of recapture them, has wonderful sort of reseduction capabilities, that person will apologize, which may also have happened when they were a child, and they get reseduced. They come back in, and the person promises they'll never do it again, but then of course they get right back into it. But they are not ready to leave, because the things they want in the relationship, they are not yet ready to give up. And they can be brainwashed. And a charismatic abusive partner can really make them feel like it is all their fault, and that they're really lucky to be with that person, and they should just be a better person, and then they wouldn't be harassed. So that's just some of the reasons that I could, as you can imagine, could go on and on and on. So healing from abuse cannot happen until the abuse is over. There is no possible way to heal while you're being abused. You can't get over sexual trauma if you're being consistently raped. I mean, it's just not a possibility. So as I said, they'll usually start out trying to change the relationship. So the 4 stages of healing, the first one is finally acknowledging that you are being abused, that the person is not okay, that the situation is not okay, that just because they're nice in one area doesn't mean that this is acceptable. It's not an audit debit column. If what they're doing to you is not okay, it isn't okay if they're nice or charming or wonderful or do things. The abuse is still not okay, ever. So the first stage is getting them to recognize you are in a really difficult situation. You have to see this, you have to accept it, and you have to understand that that abused partner is not going to stop unless you start setting boundaries, legitimate boundaries. And certainly I can teach them how to do that. Well, guess what happens when they start setting boundaries? The abuser doubles down. They're actually more harmful, more mean, more angry, because they can feel the threat of that person standing up to them. And so they get worse, and very, very often knock that person down farther than where they were before. But it is only when that person stops making excuses for the abuser and realize that they've been brainwashed and accept that their partners have no desire to take responsibility or accountability at all, then they are ready to begin their own self-healing. But until they understand that and accept that, they can't. There's no possible way. So stage 2, the decision to save self at all costs. So imagine you're on a desert island. There's only enough food for one person, and there's 2 of you on that desert island. So who gets the food? Who gets to survive? Those are called triage decisions. You have to decide, am I worth more? Is my abuser worth more? Do I have to take care of that person at my expense and die in the process? Or can I, in fact, not in any way anymore support that person's behavior? I have to put myself first, which is very difficult, because most people who are in abusive situations were never allowed to put themselves first as a child, and they keep getting in relationships where they overgive, and they consistently repeat that pattern, relationship after relationship after relationship. So being able to say, this is not selfish, this is self-preservation. Self-preservation because I have something worth giving to this world. I am worth it. I am no longer going to be at somebody else's beck and call and tortured this way, because I'm worth something. So stage 2 is the decision to save self at all costs. They need to balance their self-compassion with, how much do you owe this person? How frightened are you? But ultimately, you cannot sacrifice yourself to an individual who will not stop you from doing that. So I teach them how to begin to value themselves as a person who doesn't deserve that kind of behavior. So that would be kind of like the second stage, and that can take a long time in therapy, because they'll hear me, but they'll deflect. They'll hear me, but they'll deflect, because they don't trust in their own goodness or in their own value at all, because they've been so broken down. So it's a long process in therapy of helping a person look at everywhere else you have people who love you, everywhere else you do good things, everywhere else you have respect. Why are you this way here? Why are you allowing this to happen? And particularly if there are children involved, watching that. How are you going to stop this from not being, as I said earlier, an intergenerational horror? Somewhere, somehow, you have to become that hero to your children that says this is not okay. And that can cause all kinds of problems, as I said, with that person's mother or father, who can turn on the kids or use them as battering rams. So this is complicated. I don't want to ever imply this is easy, or you just have to do this. Some people have to stay in a relationship because they don't have any money or nowhere to go, and they have to endure abuse because that's all they have. And I only have deep compassion for that. So I'm not superficializing this in any way, saying, oh, just say no. It's just not that simple. There are too many other variables that I'm trying to, as I said, sort of squeeze into a very small container here. But just to give you an idea what these four stages have to be like. So once we can get that person to say, I am worth saving at all costs, I am worth it. I have something beautiful to offer into this world, and I'm not going to let anybody stop me from doing that. That takes time. But when people begin to stand up like that, it is remarkable. Their posture changes. The way they sit facing me changes. They are able to somehow laugh again. They begin to take risks. You can see it building. It's a beautiful thing. It would be like taking a foster child in who had been abused and then giving them the kind of life they need and watching them just blossom in front of you. As a therapist, it's incredibly rewarding to watch that stage occur. Then stage 3, the building of compassion for self. Oh, I was so stupid. No, you weren't. Why did I let that happen to me? Because you had no other choice and you were doing the best you could. But I should never put all this into myself. I'm an idiot. Why did I do that? They start beating themselves up, and I think, no, this is the time for total self-compassion, because you are going to ultimately have to have compassion for other people who sell themselves out, not judging them because of what you've been through and what you know and how hard it is to change these patterns. This ability to have compassion for self is absolutely crucial. You're liberated. You're not living your life on a witness stand. You have to kind of say to the child in you, I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you, baby. I'm so proud of you becoming a hero, acting in the face of fear, letting your courage overcome your fears. Look at what you've done. You have to have respect and compassion and support and caring for who you have been, and never put yourself down for the part you played in this process. Never. And the last stage, of course, super important. And believe it or not, once people get through these first 3 stages, this 4th stage almost comes automatically. Not to preach, but a person becomes a model by their liberation, by their transformation to other people who are living in similar situations, because they have a combination of compassion, of support, and also of understanding those people have to find their own way just the way you did. But you're the model, you're the light, you're holding the lantern. They can see that you've done it. It gives people hope that maybe they could do it as well. It's beautiful to see because it generalizes everywhere in their lives. They begin standing up for what they believe in everywhere. They begin making themselves known everywhere. And people feel that confidence. The beautiful confidence that comes from transforming yourself from being a victim into a hero. So that's what the 4 stages are. And again, in a very, very short time, trying to encapsulate a huge heartache in relationships that I've come up against so many times. So
now, Dr. Randy, when people have this experience, you mentioned that if it's still happening, because you mentioned something about, they can heal only when it stops. But I'm
yes,
sure you have customers or patients that are going through it at the moment when they're
Yeah.
talking about. How do you deal with that?
Well, by when I'm with them and they are being abused at the same time as they are trying to change, and that we talk about it. Those are examples. What could you have done differently within your capacity right now? Could you have done something differently? Could you have disconnected? There are a number of ways that you could behave within that abusive situation that are different, but not quite as threatening, as you begin to build your courage from inside out, not toughness from the outside in, but courage from the inside out. And we use those as examples because we're in therapy and we can talk about them. What happened today? How did you behave? How was that different from yesterday? And little by little, you see them inching forward into not running away. The thing that stops people from changing is they're not recognizing the severity of what they are accepting.
Mm.
Telling them, would you want your child to be married to someone like this, your son or your daughter? How would that make you feel if they took what you are doing and used that as a template for their own relationships? Oh my God, I might feel horrible. But you're modeling that for them. So maybe you need a different reason inside. Maybe you have to think of them first before you think about yourself, and maybe they'll give you the strength you need. Or friends that are going through similar situations and feeling sad for them. You have to keep them facing the truth, facing the truth, facing the truth in an environment, a therapeutic environment of compassion and support, not indulgence, but tough love, but delivered with absolute care, and never saying to them, what's wrong with you? Why do you let people hurt you like that? That's terrible, because they can't stop it because of all those variables we're talking about. But I have seen, Ryan, multiple people come out of these relationships and transform. It's an unbelievable joy as a therapist to see that happen. So I have a lot of confidence that for many people it can. Not for all people, but for many people.
Okay. Well, that's a very interesting article, and I think once we have this out there, hopefully people will be able to realize and perhaps reach out to yourself or to others that that are professionals. Where can your viewers find your information?
Well, anybody can write to me on my personal email address, Randy Gunther, one word, lowercase, Randy with an I, at cox.net. And by the way, as I said in our last podcast, if you have a subject you'd like me to talk about, love for you to share that with me. They can also go to my site where I have the 250 articles I've written for Psychology Today are all on one site. That's relationshipsactually.org. They can certainly go there, and then welcome, of course, to listen to more podcasts. I think we're going to be doing them every week for a while, hopefully, and can offer more and more information about these things. There are also on the internet many wonderful organizations to help people. There's probably also AI programs now to help people do what I do in my office, because this is such a prevalent situation. In third world countries, of course, it is the norm. But in our country, even where we think people have freedom, can speak out, people need help.
Got it. All right, Dr. Randy, thank you so much for your time and putting this out there to the universe. I think it's going to be a great deal of information that people will find. So until next week, Dr. Randy, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Ryan.